Latest U.S. and international news. A powerful winter storm system continues to impact large portions of the United States, while rising tensions over federal immigration enforcement and global developments dominate today's headlines. Winter Storm Fern has turned deadly, with at least 18 fatalities reported across the U.S. as heavy snow, crippling ice, and dangerously low temperatures stretch from the south to the northeast. Hundreds of thousands of homes remain without power, and travel disruptions continue nationwide. Authorities are urging residents to avoid unnecessary travel as hazardous road conditions persist and cleanup efforts continue. Local governments across the Midwest and South report ongoing road closures, delayed emergency services, and strained infrastructure as crews battle ice and snow accumulation. Officials warn that refreezing overnight temperatures could worsen conditions in the coming days. In Minneapolis, a second fatal shooting by federal immigration agents this month has intensified public anger and scrutiny. The victim, a U.S. citizen, was killed during an immigration enforcement operation, according to officials. The incident has triggered widespread protests, with demonstrators demanding accountability and changes to federal immigration tactics. Minnesota leaders have called for a full investigation as tensions in the city remain high. Reports indicate President Trump is considering removing Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem amid mounting criticism over her handling of border and immigration enforcement. Sources say the move could come as part of a broader shakeup in the department, a development with potential implications for how federal immigration policy is enforced nationwide. Protests opposing immigration and customs enforcement are now spreading beyond Minnesota to major cities, including Los Angeles, New York, and Boston. Activists cite concerns over civil liberties, use of force, and expanded federal enforcement operations under the current administration. Meanwhile, Microsoft is facing backlash after its first Windows 11 update of 2026 caused widespread technical issues, including system crashes and startup failures. The company has released emergency patches, but some users continue to report problems. International developments globally. Humanitarian crises remain in focus, including deadly landslides in Indonesia and continued environmental protests across Europe. In space weather news, scientists are monitoring increased solar activity, though experts say no immediate threat to Earth is expected. Protests in Iran continue amid reports of state crackdowns and communication disruptions, drawing international attention. Meanwhile, heavy weather in parts of Europe and Asia reminds forecasters that winter is still producing major storms worldwide. From historic winter weather to legal fights and potential leadership changes in Washington, today's headlines reflect a mix of national stress and international unrest. Minnesota Gov. Tim Walz says President Donald Trump has agreed to look into reducing the federal immigration enforcement presence in the state, responding to growing outrage over multiple fatal shootings by federal agents during a controversial crackdown known as Operation Metro Surge. Walz has repeatedly called for ICE and other federal agents to pull back after 3 Minnesotans were shot in recent weeks, including the fatal shooting of 37-year-old ICU nurse Alex Preddy in Minneapolis. Trump and Walz spoke by phone Monday, with both sides calling the conversation productive. Trump agreed to discuss scaling back the number of agents in Minnesota and to work more closely with state authorities on investigations into federal enforcement operations. Trump also affirmed his support for letting Minnesota's Bureau of Criminal Apprehension lead investigations into incidents involving federal officers. In a further move, Trump is sending longtime border official Tom Homan, known as the White House Border Czar, to Minnesota to oversee ICE operations on the ground. The administration says Homan will help manage enforcement efforts and coordinate with investigators amid ongoing protests and legal challenges. Department of Homeland Security has confirmed some agents involved in the fatal Alex Preddy shooting were wearing body cameras, and that footage is now under review as part of the broader investigation into the incident. Meanwhile, a federal judge is considering the legality of the Minnesota immigration crackdown, with arguments underway over whether to limit or halt Operation Metro Surge, amid bipartisan concerns about state sovereignty and excessive use of force. The deadly shooting of Alex Preddy, a legally armed U.S. citizen who had a lawful permit and was fatally shot by a Border Patrol agent during a chaotic protest, has intensified national scrutiny of immigration enforcement tactics and sparked protests across multiple cities. Major developments today span U.S. military action, immigration policy, extreme weather recovery, and international migration reform. U.S. military drills in the Middle East. The United States has launched multi-day aerial military drills in the Middle East, amid heightened tensions with Iran. U.S. officials say the exercises are meant to deter aggression and reassure allies, as an American aircraft carrier strike group remains positioned in the region. Pressure mounts on DHS leadership. In Washington, Republican lawmakers are calling for the removal of Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem, citing concerns over immigration enforcement and recent fatal encounters involving federal agents. Investigations continue into federal operations in Minnesota, keeping immigration policy under intense scrutiny. Winter storm aftermath across the U.S. The impacts of Winter Storm Fern continue to disrupt communities across the country. While snowfall has eased, icy roads, power outages, and extreme cold persist in several states. Officials warn that refreezing conditions remain dangerous as cleanup and recovery efforts continue. Northeast weather impacts. In the New York City metro area, lingering snow and bitter cold have led to school closures, hazardous travel, and cold-related deaths, prompting renewed warnings to limit exposure and protect vulnerable residents. Deadly plane crash in India. Internationally, a Learjet crash in Maharashtra, India, killed several people, including a senior state official, after the aircraft burst into flames on impact. Authorities are investigating the cause of the crash. Iran, protests continue. Protests against Iran's government remain ongoing, with authorities imposing internet restrictions to curb demonstrations. Human rights groups continue to raise concerns about communication shutdowns and treatment of protesters. Spain announces major migration reform. In Europe, Spain has approved a landmark plan to grant legal status to up to 500,000 undocumented migrants, calling it a migration model based on human rights. Under the new policy, eligible migrants who have lived in Spain for several months and have no criminal record will receive temporary residence and work permits, allowing them to enter the formal labor market. The Spanish government says the move will promote integration, address labor shortages, and strengthen social cohesion, while critics argue it could conflict with broader EU migration rules. From military tensions and immigration debates in the US, to severe weather recovery and sweeping migration reform in Europe, today's headlines reflect growing global pressure on governments to balance security, economic stability, and human rights.
Several new developments are shaping headlines today across U.S. foreign policy, immigration enforcement, global diplomacy, and markets. U.S.-Iran tensions escalate. President Donald Trump has intensified pressure on Iran, warning of severe consequences if negotiations over Tehran's nuclear program fail. U.S. officials confirmed additional military assets remain positioned in the region as part of a broader deterrent strategy. The heightened rhetoric has raised concerns among allies about potential escalation. Minneapolis Immigration Enforcement Update. In Minnesota, Border Czar Tom Homan traveled to Minneapolis, holding talks with local and state officials as protests continue following the fatal shooting of Alex Preddy by federal agents. The visit comes as the administration attempts to contain unrest and respond to criticism over immigration enforcement tactics. New guidance reportedly instructs agents to avoid direct engagement with protesters. Europe moves toward sanctions on Iran. Internationally, the European Union is preparing possible sanctions against Iran's Revolutionary Guard, citing its role in suppressing ongoing protests. The move would mark a significant escalation in Europe's response to Iran's internal crackdown and could further strain diplomatic relations. Markets react to global uncertainty. Global financial markets traded mixed as investors balanced strong corporate earnings against rising geopolitical risks. Energy prices edged higher amid Middle East tensions, while precious metals saw renewed interest as safe haven assets. Southeast Asia rejects Myanmar election. In Asia, the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, ASEAN, announced it does not recognize Myanmar's recent election, arguing it lacks legitimacy under military rule. The statement underscores continuing regional pressure on Myanmar's junta. U.S. weather and local emergencies continue. Across parts of the United States, bitter cold and lingering winter hazards continue to affect daily life. Local officials are responding to fire incidents, vehicle crashes, and weather-related emergencies, while forecasters monitor the possibility of another winter system later this weekend. Today's headlines highlight rising geopolitical tension, ongoing immigration enforcement fallout, and global diplomatic shifts as governments navigate security concerns, public unrest, and economic uncertainty.
Several major developments are unfolding today across the United States, the Middle East, Europe, and global markets, with immigration enforcement, geopolitical tensions, and economic leadership changes dominating the news cycle. Nationwide anti-IC protests and general strike. Across the U.S., a nationwide IC out protest movement is underway, with activists calling for a general strike urging people to skip work, school, and shopping. The demonstrations follow a series of fatal encounters involving federal immigration agents, most notably in Minneapolis, and reflect growing anger over immigration enforcement tactics. Protesters say the goal is to pressure the federal government to scale back enforcement operations and increase accountability. Law enforcement agencies are on heightened alert as protests expand to airports, detention centers, and major city centers. U.S.-Iran tensions and direct talks. President Donald Trump confirmed he is speaking directly with Iranian leadership amid a significant U.S. military buildup in the Middle East. Warships and aircraft remain positioned in the region as Washington seeks to deter Iran, while keeping diplomatic channels open. Officials say the talks are aimed at preventing escalation, but critics warn the situation remains volatile as Iran's nuclear ambitions and regional influence continue to raise alarm. EU designates Iran's IRGC a terrorist organization. In a major diplomatic move, the European Union has formally designated Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps as a terrorist organization. The decision follows months of debate and comes in response to the IRGC's role in cracking down on protests inside Iran. The designation allows for expanded sanctions, asset freezes, and travel bans, further isolating Tehran and escalating pressure on the Iranian government. Trump nominates new Federal Reserve Chair. President Trump has nominated Kevin Warsh to serve as the next chair of the Federal Reserve, signaling a potential shift in U.S. monetary policy. Markets reacted quickly, with investors assessing how Warsh's views on inflation, interest rates, and economic growth could reshape the central bank's direction. Analysts say the nomination could influence borrowing costs, housing markets, and global financial stability. Dangerous cold and renewed storm threats. Much of the United States remains under dangerous cold conditions, with forecasters warning of another possible winter storm heading into the weekend. Emergency officials are urging residents to prepare for snow, ice, and travel disruptions as temperatures remain well below normal. The renewed weather threat comes as many communities are still recovering from earlier storms that strained infrastructure and emergency services. ASEAN diplomacy and regional cooperation. In Southeast Asia, the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, ASEAN, is seeing renewed diplomatic activity. Leaders praised Malaysia's role in regional peace efforts, while discussions with Japan focused on border security and economic cooperation. These talks highlight ASEAN's push to maintain stability amid growing competition between major global powers in the region. European football and transfer market buzz. In sports, European football headlines are trending as Champions League matchups and winter transfer moves capture global attention. Clubs across Europe are making high-value signings as teams position themselves for knockout stages, with fans closely watching how these changes could shift league and tournament outcomes. From nationwide protests and rising geopolitical tensions to major economic leadership changes and severe weather risks, today's headlines reflect a world navigating political pressure, security concerns, and economic uncertainty, with developments expected to continue unfolding in the days ahead.